I have to use Matt's analysis. This, first of all, this is the most. This is definitely coffee in a Bracken week because Matt was on. He was on here Saturday. Yesterday, you and Matt Smith. Yesterday it was Matt Smith and Matt Bracken, and I was all screwed up between Bracken. Who do I call Matt? Who do I, referring to you as your last name? And today it's the opposite, right? Matt, you're screwed up today because you got me and Michael Yan on. So
yeah, it's Matt and two mics. But Saturday. I did something I've never done, and I contacted you and said we got to make a podcast right now because I had just watched a podcast with pretty well known people like Pepe Escobar. This is like Saturday morning, right? And he's saying, well, the Iranians are going to send a force in to defend the city of Homs. It's from the north to south. It's Aleppo, Hama, Homs, then Damascus, a big gap at Damascus. And he was saying like, well, the Iranians are going to send a force in to make a defensive perimeter around Homs. And I'm like, are you shitting me? This is all going down today, right? This is not next week or next month. So I contacted you and said, we got to do a video, right now. And I'm glad we did because like that night, Damascus fell.
yeah, and it's so interesting. Even I just had Paul Craig Roberts on a couple hours ago, and he was talking about. I'd heard him on an interview a couple days ago, but he was saying how that Russia looked weak and Putin is now, and I'm paraphrasing, and the episode will be out actually later today, but so it'll be out before this comes out tomorrow. But he was talking how Russia appears weak, and they've allocated their resources back to focus on Ukraine, and that the neocons will then push Russia to make Putin, either push the red button or not, but he's more interested in saving the world rather than accelerating this into nuclear war. What do you guys think about that?
Well, for Russia, Syria is a lily pad base on the way to Libya and the rest of Africa. So at low cost, they've been at low expenditure in lives and capital, they've been able to push France and America out of Africa, which is great because it's like a hanging scalps on the tent. And without Syria, it makes it very difficult to support the air bases in Libya and then in Central Africa. But that's a sideshow for Russia. They can cut that off, and who cares? Because the primary focus is Ukraine. I mean, by multiple factors. So if they lose Syria, the bases in Syria, or they don't lose the bases in Syria, it's nothing compared to what's going on in Ukraine. To try to support Assad at this point, where it was obvious he was, had collapsed, would have required a major diversion of resources. So they've just amputated it. Now there's even talk, though, that the new government will allow them to keep bases, their air base and their naval base on the Mediterranean. And there's reasons for everybody to do this, even a new regime, because the Russian naval ships pulled out of these ports at Latakia and Tartus, and the IDF just flew in and sank the remaining Syrian Navy, which were basically like 30, 40-year-old obsolete gunboats, with OSA missiles and those horizontal deck canisters, which is no loss to anybody. So the Israelis are taking advantage of this power vacuum, the interruption between, fully established governments, to just annihilate every target in Syria that they can. But the new power to be in Syria is thinking, if the Russians are here, it'll be a counterbalance against Israel just feeling like they can bomb anything at will. Because Israel would have never bombed these ports if the Russian naval ships had still been there. So there's, we're like looking through a keyhole at a tiny perspective, open source perspective. But I'm sure that the Russians, the Israelis, the Turks, the Americans, and what's left of the Syrian government, they've all been communicating through multiple channels. And And I don't think that the Russians are going to be exclusively thrown out of Syria. It's not to the benefit of the new government to just totally flip to the NATO American side, and become a total vassal. Keeping the Russians in Latakia and Tartus can help them and serve as like a counterweight so that they have a little bit of leverage. Otherwise, they're just like, a prostitute on her back with her legs open. Do what you will, Israel. Nobody's here to stop anything. I mean, it's interesting times, but I think that the Russians will be back in their ports and their air bases.
Michael, what do you think? Michael, what do you think of the whole Syria situation?
Sorry, I just heard some noise outside, but you're probably not picking up on this excellent microphone.
No, not at all.
I'm in Buenos Aires. It's quite loud sometimes. It's a great place, though. I highly advise people come check it out if you haven't been here before. I think this is doing what wars typically do, or always do. They grow, and they grow unexpectedly, and they last longer than people expect. And you can see that nobody's really in control. Nobody can turn this off at this point, right? People can start fires, an arsonist can start a fire, but he can't turn it off unless he puts it out when it's very small. So right now, it's got a life of its own. Wars do that. Wars, they take on their own life. They become their own thing. And that's what's happened here. Nobody's really running it at this point. It's a multiplayer game. And now a lot of it's about energy, as Matt's pointed out many times, and as have others. Routes, we've known that. I mean, this has been since forever, right? Since long before any of our grandparents were born. The great game continues. It's just a new blossom in the great games, right? Like Nord Stream and the Baltic pipeline and all these different things. They're just all new iterations, new blooms in the great game.
Going back past World War I.
Yeah, way back. And even before that, globalists come in many, many forms, by the way. Globalism is nothing new either. I'm Christian. I come from a Christian background as well. And Christianity is a globalist per se. I mean, I grew up, that's why we send missionaries all over the world, right? And as are Islamists, right? There's different forms of this. Catholics are globalist as well. We're all globalists. There's many different types of globalism, right? And then there's Judaism, which tries to get on the horse of the other globalist and be like a meta globalist, right?
Everywhere.
Yeah. So exactly. So there's different types of globalist. There's different, like communism is a globalist firmware, right? Nazism, communism. What's the difference in these things at some point, right? I mean, on some level, they're just different firmwares of globalism, takeover by any means necessary. And that's what, I'm here in Argentina. Argentina this country's got a huge pork chop around its neck, like Panama does, like Netherlands does. Huge pork chops. Many countries are like this. But this country has energy security. It has enough security to run the place. It's got amazing food supplies. We were just in a giant grocery store that's as big as any grocery store I've seen in the United States. We were just in it like 45 minutes ago. And it's unbelievable. And 2 floors and beef, very cheap and that sort of thing. And everything that you want, right? They've got.
I remember being with Michael in Panama 2 years ago, and we went right into a big like Costco type supermarket, and I'm like, okay, we got to buy a few things. And Michael's walking around with his cell phone camera, and making verbal notes like eggs, milk, rice. It's like this was like a scalable metric for Michael. Like what we're being told about these places are lies. The food is cheap, abundant. So whenever I hear Michael saying I went into a supermarket, it's like this is recon.
It's exactly what it is. And I'm always doing that everywhere I go, every country I go to. And I've been meeting with high level people in this government and just normal people, regular people as well, and learning a lot of things. I think Argentina is quite clear. It has a pork chop around its neck because it has energy security, right? And there's an IOM here, by the way. It has energy security, food security, very low population density. It's basically almost a vacuum, and so the military is quite weak. They were unable to beat the British out of the Falklands, which here are called the Malvinas, and it's a very touchy subject here.
And now the Chinese are raping both the coast of Chile and Argentina with these like mega fishing fleets just strip mining the ocean.
Yep, they are, and there's lithium here and that sort of thing, and I mean, this is a resource-rich country, so it's clear that there's a fight. And by the way, Buenos Aires is one of the biggest Jewish cities in the world. A lot of people don't realize that. And you know, after World War II, a lot of the Nazis came here, a lot of Jews came here, and before that as well. This is actually a very Buenos Aires is very European. It's nothing like what a lot of people expect. There's a joke here that the Argentinians, or especially those from Buenos Aires, I think they say that they're Italians who speak Spanish and who think they're English, and they want to live like French. They tell that joke about themselves, actually. Right. Their sense of humor is extreme here. I love it. And they're extremely friendly people. Like they're very, very friendly. That's one of the things I've found most enjoyable about Buenos Aires so far. We've been here for more than a month, is the people are overwhelmingly polite and courteous, and just, they want to talk and tell what's going on. The other night,
it's very European. People think that going from like the states south, it becomes more Latino, spices are hotter, you know, keep going further south. But if you look at the equator as sort of like a crisscross, like the Panama Canal, of the world, it starts going the other way, because in South America, it's not Indian or mestizo or black, it's European.
Rather, they got, another thing I do, you're right. And another thing that I do is go to bookstores. You know, I got check fuel prices always, check food prices and availabilities and that sort of thing. But also books, man. I bought a whole bunch of books. You know, I love old books. I actually read them too. I don't just buy them. I'm not a bibliomaniac. I'm a bibliophile. There's a difference. Bibliomaniacs just buy books to buy books. They got a mania. They're like, you know, Hunter Biden on crack or something. But but I go to old books like Hunter Biden on crack, like this one from 1648. It's actually printed in 1923, but it's about, I found it, they're talking about using intoxicants on the Indians in Guatemala, how to rip off the Indians and stuff. So you can't make up the stuff. But anyway, they got bookstores everywhere, man, everywhere. I mean, like massive antique bookstores. And a book like this, how much was this book? This book was $5, man. In Tokyo, that book would be like $50, man. $100. This was $5. Yep. I got a whole stack of them. I got to mail them.
I remember when you were in Okinawa and we were doing a podcast, and you were in some random hotel, and you were like, the lighting moved. You said, wait a minute, I got to grab this book. And you were like, a lamp on the desk was being supported by a stack of books. And it was like 200-year-old books that you had just bought.
Yeah.
They were holding up a lamp.
Yeah, I can't believe I did that. Put a lamp on books that old. But I respect the books a great deal. Well, sometimes.
But the lamp was at the wrong place. So.
Yeah. Oh man, these old books, man. And this one is talking about how the Indians up in Guatemala, they would make this intoxicant out of. They would use like sugar cane and water and honey and whatnot, and they would throw a toad in there, and they would put the top on for however they put the top on for 2 weeks to a month, and it was just absolutely rotten. And the Indians just get crazy drunk, and the Spaniards would come in and use that drunkenness to just rob them blind, to just steal from the Indians, which is what I see everywhere. Everywhere I go in the world, I see that, robbing the natives. Right now, the Indians that you were with, Matthew, up in the Darien Gap, you know, Francisco that you met, the Indian chief or mayor of 28 villages, his people are now drinking a lot of alcohol. Last time I went to Bajo Chiquito, which was, after we went together, now you see a lot of alcohol out there. It wasn't there when you and I went there. Occasional beers out there. Now it's piles of beer cans and stuff. And Francisco's like, oh, my young people are starting to drink. They're doing drugs. They're beating their wives. They never did this before. They don't want to farm. They don't want to learn our ways.
And this is a microcosm example as we've discussed, George Soros, who's like, on his deathbed, but they're trying to pass the torch like a North Korean dynasty to Alexander Soros. Before George Soros and his open society were known for unlimited immigration everywhere, he was for complete deregulation of all drug laws everywhere. And it's like, why? What is this, financier got to do with, why is he so interested in like legalizing every kind of drug everywhere in the world? Because it just stupefies a population. It allows them to be easily taken over, like these Guatemala Indians hundreds of years ago, or what's happening in jungles in Darien Gap today, or across America and Europe. Stupefied, drugged people don't resist.
That's right. Right out of Rape of the Mind in the 1956 book by Joost Meerloo, which I've recommended like 500 times. Rape of the Mind talks about this specifically, like the Chinese specifically using opium, that they forbid opium among their own people, and they always play the victim. Hey, we're victims of the English and the English opium war, which Chinese were involved in as well. But
there is a revenge factor.
However, no, they just lying. They're professional victims, man. I spent a year running around China. They're professional victims, and professional victims are always predators. They're always professional victimizers. And the Chinese have for centuries been using drugs. Like I found one book from 1892, I think it was, from a guy named McKay. He was a missionary from Canada. He went to Formosa, right? And he was talking about how the Indians were the natives there were the
Taiwan, for people that don't know what Formosa is.
Yeah, and he was talking about how the natives there, which were actually headhunters and cannibals, but the McKay, the missionary, he was a dentist from Canada. He was a missionary, but he said that they were actually quite nice, except for the cannibalism and headhunting, until the Chinese came in with their intoxicants. I was just over in Taiwan earlier this year with Masako, and we several times met with a close advisor to the president, went to lunch with him, went to dinner with him. We were in his office, and I asked him about drug problems. I'm like, hey, last time I was in Taiwan, there wasn't like graffiti all over the place, right? Like, what's up with this? Like, I'm seeing some change here. I said, are there any drug problems now in Taiwan? He's like, actually, we're starting to get some fentanyl from China, from mainland China, in Taiwan, right? But in the book Rape of the Mind, the Chinese are using drugs against Siam, against Thailand, right? They're using opium. And it's in the book Rape of the Mind. Chinese are constantly, if you read it's not about revenge. That's what they say. They were using drugs as a weapon long before the British were doing it, and the Chinese were involved in it. That's just how they roll, man. They're like Zionists.
I'm in Florida, and in the last election in November, one of the laws that was going to be voted on was to legalize recreational pot in Florida, and it required
Amendment 3.
It required a 2/3. It passed by a majority, but it needed 2/3, and so it failed. There's already quote unquote medicinal marijuana in Florida. This would have just allowed, just street corner, like a drugstore, like a liquor store. But people need to understand, I was born in 1957. The pot that was available in the 70s, the street pot weed was comparatively like 3-2 beer. It was not cultivated. It was not sinsemilla, highly cultivated stuff. The pot that's sold now is closer to what would have been considered hashish, like really concentrated. And instead of like of alcohol, if you look at beer and you say, 3.2 beer, 3.2%, you got to drink like 20 beers to feel a buzz. Or if you're drinking an IPA and it's like 8% alcohol, compared to wine or whiskey or grain alcohol, going up the scale towards, because I'm only mentioning this because people don't have any concept of this. They just think pot. Pot. I was in college in the 70s and 80s. I smoked pot, but the pot then was like beer. The pot now is like grain alcohol. So when they say we're going to legalize pot, recreational pot, they're talking about a level of THC intoxication that's closer to grain alcohol than beer. So if for example, and they say, oh, well, it'll only be for 21 and over. 21 and over means that the kid brother of the guy that bought it is going to be, stealing it out. It'll be at the high school level, the grade school level, and kids that are smoking a joint of this stuff before class, they're going to be stoned all day. That's the ramification of legalized pot, recreational pot. It's not the pot that boomers remember. It's not pot at the beer level. It's pot at the grain alcohol level. So and it can be cut with fentanyl or anything else. So I mean, it can be cut with other drugs because it's just very cheap to just sprinkle something else on the pot and then call it like a high grade. You don't know what you're getting. So even at at my level in Florida, this is a war that's going on, and it's a war for the minds of the next generation, because if they're just available, if they're just if recreational, high quality, extremely high content THC content pot is available, it's going to just be a stupefied generation that'll be easily taken down.
Masako and I went. Go ahead, sir.
No, I was just saying it already is, though. Don't you feel like that? Because when I had Dave Collum on a couple of days ago, he was talking how the amount of minors in car accidents is way down, and at first glance, you first hear that, you're like, oh, that's a good thing. But then the flip side of it, I think it was Dave that said it, like these kids, they're not doing anything. They're not leaving their bedrooms.
They're not driving.
They're not going anywhere.
They're not driving.
They stay in their rooms all day long.
When I was a kid, you could get a learner's permit at 15. We were all driving. By 16, we all had driver's licenses. And now they just want to, sit here stupefied, moving their thumbs.
Video games, phone, but they don't want to leave their rooms.
Right. In Tokyo, Michael, didn't you say there's people that married their sex robot? They never leave?
Yeah, we went with Chuck Holton and Masako Ganaha and I. We interviewed a guy that had married a plastic doll. It was really bizarre. But, Masako and I, we went to a cannabis expo here in Buenos Aires roughly a month ago, and maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago now. And there was people with their children on their shoulders and crayons drawn on, and people are smoking dope all around the kids. It was 120 stalls. It was very highly well done. And they had the big people dressed up in the suits, like sort of like Donald Duck, but not Donald Duck. And one of them, I photographed them, one of them had it that was written on the back of the hat, Satan and Company, right? I mean, this has nothing to do with recreational drugs or all the benefits of medical cannabis. That's utter bullshit. This is a weapon of war. That's like calling the jab a vaccine.
But this is not
a vaccine.
And for anybody over 40 or 50, this is not the pot you remember. This is not beer level pot.
You should see it in Thailand,
grain
Matthew.
Alcohol level pot.
You should see it in Thailand. In Thailand, there's over 9,400 licenses now in Thailand as of about 2 months ago when we left. And there's dope stores everywhere. 2 years ago, I didn't see any of that. Now they're everywhere. And when you go into the stores, you can mix the feelings you want to have, like from a menu: happy, energetic, happy, relaxed, happy, sleepy, happy, study, melancholy. So there's like a big menu that you can mix the feelings that you want to have simultaneously. And you look at the dope through these little sort of magnifying glasses. You can see all little crystals and stuff. I'm like, what are all these crystals? But these are like 7-Eleven level stores. You know what I mean? They're not 7-Elevens, but there's thousands of them, and they're really well done. They're not like just a stand that somebody put up. It's corporate.
And now it makes sense. And I'm using George Soros as an avatar for many other forces, but now it makes sense. Why did George Soros, starting in the 80s, come out globally for abolition of all drug laws?
To abolish the borders.
But then the borders. First, drugs for everybody, then no borders.
Yeah. And then, and the people that love to smoke dope a lot, They're like, well, I got to have my freedom too, man. Hey, I get it. I get it. And they're like, what about alcohol? And I'm like, what about it? It's the same thing. It's intoxicants that they're using to destroy us, whether it's prescription drugs or whether it's stuff that you buy on the street, or fentanyl is utterly destructive. It's unbelievable. Or alcohol. It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. Intoxicants are the grease of information war. But the dopers will go, well, what about alcohol? That makes people violent. Dope. You never hear people getting in any fights smoking dope. Well, those times have changed. Now you do. But even if that were true, that's a problem too. We have no border. We have no border, right? And they're talking about whether dope should be available on every street corner. We have no border.
Right. We're being invaded. We're being invaded, and the potential defenders are stupefied watching videos.
Right. And they're arguing about whether or not my body, my choice with the chemicals. Meanwhile, Trump was pushing Amendment 3 for Florida, which is where you're at, which is where I'm from. I'm still a Floridian.
Yeah,
deep down
Roger
inside.
Stone. Roger Stone.
I call him Roger Stoner now. He can go to hell, right? People are like, you want to meet Roger Stone? No. And I don't want to go on Stoner Joe Rogan's show either. People can stop asking me. I'm not going on his show. He's trash. He's pushing the dope, right? At some point, you got to push. You got to say, that's it. I don't want to be on your Stoner show, right? I want you to hear my hatchet, my little tiny hatchet hitting your redwood tree. Every day, I'm chopping a little chips off your redwood tree, right? That's me, Joe. I know you're way up in the top of the big redwood tree, and all I got's a little hatchet, and I'm chopping away. I don't want to go up in a branch and talk to your crowd. No, it's time for American men to stand up and get deadly serious. We're losing the country. It's being destroyed.
Elon Musk, who's legitimate genius, and I have a lot of respect for him.
Is he?
No,
he pushed the jab. The science is unequivocal.
I want to go through the whole history. I mean, he's a legitimate, genius with great business acumen, but at various points he was on Rogan smoking the dope. I wish that some people like this would come out and say it was a mistake. I made a mistake. I wish Trump would say that warp speed was a mistake.
But he won't. Trump is totally double, and people totally are like, well, Trump never pushed the jab. They're slaves. To talk like that is a slave talk, right? That's like saying Trump didn't actually force me to put the gun to my head. Nobody walked across the street and he gave the best rifle in the world to that guy over there that wants to kill you. He gave it to him. No, but Trump didn't shoot you. No, but he gave the best rifle in the world to the guy across the street who then walked over and put a round in your chest. That's what Trump did. Trump is clearly a Zionist. Trump clearly was pushing Amendment 3. Trump clearly is not on our side, right? I am not convinced that he's going to do mass deportations. If he does, I'm there to help. But even at the same time, he's not talking about the actual cause. If he's really serious about stopping this and reversing it, it's time to talk about mass deportations, closing the border, and absolutely going after everybody who's doing this, physically going after them and stopping them. He's not talking about that. He's not talking about going after IOM and the United Nations. I haven't seen him lift a finger about saying, hey, we're going to arrest all you people, right? You know what I mean? We're going to close your office in New York. We're going to go to all your offices around the United States, and we're going to close every single one of them. We're going to take every single computer. We're going to take everything that you've got. You're not going to operate here anymore. We're going to take all your bank accounts.
No,
but he's not doing it. He's we're going to do mass deportations.
I agree.
I'll help him do it.
I agree. And I voted for Trump, but I'm voting for Trump in the same way that, and I use this example, and I was surprised Mike Ferris hadn't seen this film, but it's I
got it recorded though. I got it recorded actually, so I'm going to watch it.
The film Flight with Denzel Washington. He's an alcoholic airline pilot, and the morning of the plane's malfunction, he's like sneaking mini bottles like right before flying. So he's an alcoholic pilot, but when something happens with the hydraulics and the plane is out of control, he is really trying hard to land the plane in a field with only a few casualties. To me, that's Trump. I with all of his faults, I'll take Trump over the pilot for German wings, who was about to be grounded, had psychological and vision problems, and when his pilot, he was a co-pilot when the plane was flying across France back towards Germany. When the senior pilot went out of the cockpit, he locked it hit the head. He locked him out, and then he set the airplane at cruise control at like 7,000 feet to fly right into the French Alps. Okay, so I'm not looking for. I won't support anybody unless it's Jesus Christ, or in flying terms, unless it's Captain what's his name, Snellenberger, the Miracle on the Hudson pilot.
He was a very serious man.
Sullenberger.
Yeah.
I won't vote for any pilot unless it's Sullenberger. That's not the choice. The choice is the guy that's going to fly straight into the mountain.
That's how they get us in the kayfabe. They always get us in red pill or green pill. How about, why would you take any pill from somebody you don't know, right?
But if you don't take either pill, it's not just you. Everybody is voting. And if the vote is for the person that wants to fly the plane straight into the mountain, if the drunk pilot Denzel Washington, who at least is trying to land the plane, right, and he puts it into a field, and 98%.
I don't see Trump as that guy trying to land the plane. He's not flying our plane. He's flying the plane for somebody else.
Well,
the thing is, the choices
you can definitely tell how many Zionists he's picked in his,
who warned 1,000 times that's what's going to happen. And here it is, right? At some point, I think I've earned enough respect to talk about Trump. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he's doing exactly what I said he would do, right? He's doing exactly what I said he would do. That guy is not representing us. He represents Zionists.
And well, I mean, a lot of it is just pure ego for sure. But I'm starting to connect, at least in my mind, there's like a viable, a viable outline you can make that connects October 7th to Syria directly.
Clearly. I mean, like, obviously, like
everything that's happened
wide.
with October 7th being a green flag operation like Pearl Harbor or the Lusitania or the Gulf of Tonkin or Remember the Maine in Havana Harbor. You need something. You need something to stampede the herd. You got to stampede the herd. You have to stampede the herd, and to stampede the herd, you need Remember the Maine, Remember the Lusitania, Remember Pearl Harbor, Tonkin Gulf, or October 7th. And everything that's happened since October 7th. October 7th was the green light to level Gaza, to turn Gaza into Dresden. And then the next phase was Hezbollah in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon. It's like, well, Israel didn't really win there. No, but what they did was, after the pager and walkie-talkie attacks, which was, diabolically clever, as like a decapitation at the very beginning of the
Matthew, by the way,
Lebanon.
Those radios that they blew up, those were the radios that we used in Darien when you were there.
Yeah, same type. But this Hezbollah is a existing military force that could have gone into Syria to assist Assad. But so moving from October 7th to a year of Gaza to southern Lebanon, that pulled all of remaining Hezbollah into southern Lebanon and fixed it in place. So it was not available to swing over into Syria to assist Assad, Syria's soldiers. Like the Syrian army is kind of a joke because they're not being paid. There's a lot of ghost soldiers, all of those phenomenon of a pretend military. But Hezbollah was not a pretend military. Hezbollah could have gone into Syria, into Damascus at least, but they were pinned in southern Lebanon. And then the events of the last week happened. Now Iran is completely cut off from the Mediterranean, that Shia crescent from Iran across Iraq, because you have to look at the Middle East in terms of percentage of Shia and Sunni. And even though Syria was not majority Shia, it was ruled by, it's majority Sunni, but it was ruled by a minority, which was Alawite, Christian, and secular non-religious Sunnis. And they allowed Iran free transit across Syria. That's all cut off now. So if you just plot this out, it's like if you did a campaign, if you started with October 7th, it sounds like crazy. Like, Matt, are you saying that the Israelis wanted October 7th to happen? No, but I think that they knew it was going to happen, and they let it happen.
They like amazingly, obviously did it. So yes,
but they allowed it because they needed a Pearl Harbor, a Lusitania. Remember the Maine. You know, they had to have something that would allow them to first carpet bomb Gaza, then pivot to southern Lebanon, pinning Hezbollah in Lebanon. Then their coordinated attack between Turkey and Israel and the quote unquote rebels kicks out the Assad faction permanently from Syria. Now Iran is completely cut off from supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon or Gaza ever. They're completely cut out of that equation. So if you look at it that way, it's like a brilliant campaign. I mean, victory after victory for Israel and Turkey. And now Syria is being carved up. I mean, it's just, I'm not saying this is like the biggest war in the world, but I like to put these things in World War II terms. If you froze World War II at like December 20th, 1941, it's like, well, Japan is definitely winning. They just beat America in Pearl Harbor. They just beat America in the Philippines. They beat the British in Singapore. They're on the verge of attacking Australia. Clearly, Japan is going to win this war. So this war is not over. Syria is just like another battle. It's like the British losing Singapore. The British didn't lose World War II because they lost Singapore. It was a setback. That's what it was for Russia in the last week. It's a setback. You've got to make recalculations, but the center of gravity of this war right now is still Ukraine, and like you always say, it's a multiplayer. There's nobody in charge of the jungle. I forget how you put that, but what's the rule of the jungle? Nobody's in charge.
Nobody runs the jungle.
Nobody runs the jungle, but there's temporary factions. It's always moving, and yeah, I talk about the pipeline. Within 2 days of the Syrian takeover, Turkish media is talking about, hey, let's get that pipeline going, right? Everybody loves a pipeline if it's crossing your territory because everybody gets paid off. It's a ATM that never stops pumping out money. I watched one of your lives
on that. You're exactly right. I mean, I watch your stuff constantly. I mean, listen, Matthew, but when it comes to Nord Stream, although it's all related, as you know, it's all related, but right. Nord Stream was there was more valence on other aspects of that. As you know, you talk about Mackinder quite often.
Yeah, killing Europe. Killing Europe.
Oh, it's destroying
BASF, Germany's Volkswagen.
Germany's cut, man. Germany's cut. It's cut right here. And that's why Masako and I went to BASF twice in advance. The second time we went to BASF in Germany was 14 days before Nord Stream got hit. 14 days before, warning that something's going to happen to Nord Stream. I thought it would probably be some kind of cyber attack, but it was obvious. But keep in mind, the day after that, the Baltic pipeline opened up, right, through Denmark and from the North Sea.
Don't you say Germans still don't believe it that we did it?
Oh man, the 2 nights ago, Masako and I went to a tango. She wanted to see the tango dance, which is pretty cool. But these people were sitting beside us, and they were speaking. I didn't think it would. Me, I would rather just read books. But Masako was like, "Let's go." So we went, and long-haired girl. And so these people are sitting beside us from Germany, and they were speaking High German, Hochdeutsch, and they were speaking very pristine German, right? And so indicating that they're probably went to a nice university or something. So I listened to them talk for a while, and then I wanted to ask them, what do you think about Nord Stream? So I just started speaking in German to them, and we talked for a while. And then I brought up Nord Stream. And like, who do you think did Nord Stream? And both of them, I'm guessing they were a married couple, maybe in their 40s or maybe 50-ish. They were like, Russia. They're just with total definitive answer, Russia. And I said something like, well, probably United States. They're like, maybe Ukraine. And that's like totally no United States, because I pushed it again on the United States, and you could see that was just like, I jumped way out of their Overton window, man. You could tell I had no more credibility with them.
Germany's like Ireland. You can't save it. They're building in clear barracks, fighting age men, military encampments right across Ireland. There's drone footage. The buses are rolling in.
Wait,
it's all fighting age men.
Matthew,
and Irish are like, let's vote for the open borders people.
A lot of people don't realize how much Matt and I track Ireland. So we're tracking it a lot more than Matt's letting on.
It's a lab experiment.
It's unbelievable what we're seeing, because daily we get updates from Ireland, right? And it's just like, and Misako and I actually flew over and looked at it. It's a dead man walking, like Canada too, but Ireland's more advanced than Canada even. But I don't think people realize how much
you can't save zombies. You can't save zombies that are walking off a cliff like lemmings.
No, but Matt Bracken and I, we track Ireland a lot, and we've asked somebody to map out the camps and that sort of thing, and it's just unbelievable when you look at what's happened. And they are already captured. They just haven't done the final. And it's like this, but they haven't squeezed yet.
And they're saying it's because I love you. Yep. I'm doing this because in my culture this means I love you, and you're saying, okay, fine, okay. Yep. How much I love you even more. So
exactly.
I just did a Substack today on what I call motorbike warfare. So Syria was taken over.
I saw it.
Yeah, by an army of 200cc motorbikes and Hilux pickup trucks, Toyota pickup trucks, and drones. And the drone teams came from Ukraine, right? Admittedly, they're proud of it. So the Syrian army, which is like one of these fake armies, it's just ghost soldiers and people maintaining positions that don't actually stand a post. So the Syrian army folded up, but it was actually an army. I mean, the Syrian army had guns, right? They had guns, and a new form of warfare happened where the operation was so rapid and so dispersed, so atomized, that there were no targets that the Syrian army, if it had wanted to fight back, could have found and acquired and targeted. Like I said in the Substack, you can see a tank from outer space. Okay, you can't tell a Hilux truck from all the other pickup trucks that are just going about doing commercial business every day. And motorbikes can assemble 50 motorbikes can assemble, and there's like almost a company or a couple platoons, with AK-47s, with anti-tank missiles, with man-pad anti-air missiles, with heavy machine guns. Then they can just disappear. 5 minutes later, they're gone out in the desert. So what they've learned from Ukraine, and the Russians both sides are using this tactic in Ukraine when they're making advances. They're not doing columns of tanks now. Columns of tanks are just dead meat. That's worse than battleships in World War II. Columns of tanks are seen from outer space, targeted by FPV drones, they're dead. But armed reconnaissance units on motorbikes can move really fast, determine what kind of defenses are out there, maybe hold ground, maybe pull back. So they use this in Syria. And so it's like, okay, so who cares, Matt? That's Syria. Look at Ireland again now in that context. You've got tens of thousands of fighting age men. Let's say half of them are from Islamic countries. Let's say half of them are jihadists. They're jihadist sympathizers. They're in these camps. I'm not saying they're all in on a big plan, that the globalists bringing them in have this plan to attack Ireland. I'm not saying that at all. But you're now making these barracks encampments across Ireland with 5,000 men, half of whom are from Muslim countries. You have trucks and buses moving in and out. One 20-foot cargo container that any flatbed can carry. So yeah, the big cargo containers that are the size of a 50-foot tractor trailer load, that's difficult to move around. The 20-foot cargo containers, any flatbed can carry it. One of those 20-foot cargo containers can hold 20 of these motorbikes, 2,000 AK-47s, RPGs, anything you want. Am I saying, oh, Matt, or am I saying, oh, yeah, definitely, they're in Ireland right now, today, ready for an invasion? No. But when you have these encampments of men, somebody is going to come up with the idea, if they have not already, that all they need is weapons and they can do a total Rwanda. Or they can easily pull the equivalent of October 7 attacks. You don't need all of the men in all of these camps to rise up like some kind of a jihad army like Syria. 50 of them can be armed and do an October 7th. If you remember the Bataclan attacks in Paris, like almost 10 years ago now, that was done by just maybe a dozen people running around Paris with a few AK-47s, a dozen, enough to slaughter people in the theater and restaurants and keep moving around, which the French police couldn't keep up with. The same kind of thing happened in Mumbai in India with those attacks, where you had mobile teams. They came from Pakistan on boats with AK-47s. You're talking what, 20 or 30 people total, directed by radio from and cell phone from Pakistan. They took over the Hotel Mumbai. There's a great movie about that, highly recommended. We're talking only a couple dozen people putting an entire city under lockdown, a siege, terror, burning hotels. Imagine what can happen in any European city if 50 or 100 of these people are armed. And what's going to happen when, let's say, Trump comes into office, or AfD takes over in Germany, or conservatives take over in Ireland or in Italy, and they say, no more welfare for you fake refugees. You have to go back home to the Middle East. We're cutting off your debit card. Your free food that you've been having for the last 2 years, 3 years, it's over. And then somebody drops off a 20-foot container loaded with AK-47s in front of their camp. I'm not saying this is even planned right now today, but like Michael, what you always say, it's about the conditions. The dry forest. All of these migrants, when they're cut off from their payments, when they're cut off from their housing, that's a condition. That's the spark condition. And then somebody drops off the container full of AK-47s. It can be Bataclan times 100, or October 7th times 100 in any of these countries. And then what are you left with? Well, Matt, that probably won't happen.
I think it will happen. I strongly think it'll happen. I've been saying it a lot. When Misako and I first went to Ireland a couple of years ago, we left. I'm like, wow, they're going to kill him. They're going to genocide Ireland. It's clear. Yeah. It's obvious.
And the Irish people are like dodo birds, or like flightless dodo birds, flapping, waddling around on a beach in some South Pacific island 200 years ago. They've lost all their defenses. Right now in New Zealand, everything is politically correct. It's about, the Maori culture, like white New Zealanders dress up like they're Maoris, and like, hey, the Maoris were recent invaders of the New Zealand islands. The Maoris were like warlike hunter-killer cannibals that exterminated the native people of New Zealand, right? The Maoris are not like, they've lived there for 10,000 years, like the Irish have lived in Ireland legit for 10,000 years.
Same in Hawaii.
But the Maoris that are celebrated in New Zealand are just another recent invader that slaughtered everybody there. So this is nothing new. Coming into an island like New Zealand a couple hundred years ago, or like Ireland today, and seeing these people are like dodo birds. They have no claws, no teeth, can't fly, no predators. They've lost all of their survival instincts. Ireland is called like the land of 1,000 welcomes. It's like our culture is just like, we love everybody, like the dodo birds. Yeah. Same thing that was Sweden 20 years ago. We're the most we're a, what do they call it? A moral superpower. We're a moral superpower because we've opened our beautiful country to these savages and wild men from the whole world. Now Sweden's like the rape capital of Europe.
They're biologically naive, or at least they used to be.
Yeah, God Sod has a book coming out, and I think it's called Fatal Empathy. It's
That's a
empathy
good title.
when it's,
if it's not the title, it should be a good title of a book.
But yeah, that's God Sod, but it's empathy when you just, we're going to be a moral superpower. We're going to show the world how we can just open our arms to killers.
You know who says that a lot is Israelis. We're the most moral. I was down in Israel with them, and one of their lieutenant colonels was like, "We're the most moral army in the world," and I was just like, "Okay,
yeah,
I don't know where to go with that."
Yeah, they're in the last couple of days, Bibi has gone up to Mount Harmon, so the Golan Heights, which Israel has occupied, it's still considered Syrian territory, but just out of realpolitik, Israel has held the Golan Heights for like half a century. Bibi has said, forget it. It's put it on the map. It's Israel. And now we're going to create a buffer zone. And there's reports that the IDF has gotten to within like 20 kilometers of Damascus. Oh, they're just probes. They're just seeing what's going on. But they're going to create a buffer zone there. Turkey is creating a buffer zone in the north. And the United States Army still has like the quarter of the eastern Syria, that corner, that angle of Syria that extends out above Iraq. The American Army is still there. That's where the oil is being pumped and sent to Turkey. So this is like the great game, 21st century edition. Syria never stood a chance with the sanctions against it, and its only source of revenue, oil, being pumped out under American control to Turkey. I mean, it never stood a chance. But as long as Syria was Russia's client state, Russia was never going to permit that pipeline across. And in the Turkey Times 2 days ago, they're already putting out stories. It's time for that pipeline, from Qatar. It'll go across Saudi Arabia, a little bit of Jordan, across Syria into Turkey, then over to Europe. And we talked about this in a couple of the last podcasts. I don't want to belabor it, but this is like huge macroeconomic factors. If you go back to the beginning of World War I and through World War I, it was all they knew already that there was a lot of that black tar coming up out of the sand down there in Saudi Arabia. That's why Lawrence of Arabia was down there.
I've seen it coming out of the ground in northern Iraq, literally like Beverly Hillbillies.
Right. So yeah,
running down a little stream, literally leaching out of the. Go ahead, sir.
Let me ask you guys something while you're describing this, Matt. So this, you talked about it yesterday too, and I encourage everyone to listen to that conversation with Matt Bracken and Matt Smith as well. But what if these people in Syria, the fractions of people now, they're not going to just, some of them are going to be paid off, but some of these people are rebels and they know how to fight, right? You're not going to be able to just get rid of these people.
No, but it's easy to control ground in open desert. It's not like it's a jungle of Panama or Vietnam. And that's why a small number of American forces are controlling a quarter of Syria in the eastern corner of it. 1,000 American troops with 10,000 paid mercenaries are controlling where the oil comes out of Syria and sending it to Turkey.
But don't you think, though, let me interrupt you, but don't you think that, isn't there a possibility, though, of these locals and these tribal groups might band together or something and start attacking?
No, because they'll pay off everybody that lives within 50 miles of that pipeline. Everybody that has a tribal interest within 50 miles of that pipeline, all of those chieftains are going to be told, hey, chieftain, what's your annual salary this year? Oh, 1,000 American dollars. How would you like to make $1 million American dollars every year, forever? You just protect that pipeline. And Syria is going to get the cheapest natural gas. The Syrian central government is all for it because if you are in charge of a national government with a pipeline going across it, you have say in that pipeline just by the fact that you could have a coup or, a rebellion and they blow up your pipeline, a big section of it. So the central government is going to be paid off. We're talking every day, millions of dollars are flowing into every economy of every country the pipeline crosses.
What about the
Nobody's going to turn down. Nobody. If somebody said, Matt, we want to put an ATM in your house, and every day $10,000 are going to come out of it forever, as long as you let this pipeline go across your backyard, I'm like, put that pipeline in my backyard. I can't see. I'll put bushes around it. $10,000 a day for an ATM forever. As long as I don't disturb the pipeline through my backyard, hell yeah, go for it.
That's a silver or lead thing. It's like, here, you can have a lot of silver or we'll drop some bombs.
Or we'll bomb the shit out of you.
Yeah, take your choice.
What about what about the remainder of the Syrian army then that Assad left behind? What will happen to those soldiers?
They're not. It's not like the people compare it to Iraq and the Baathists that were when John Bremer, I think it was his name, John Bremer, came in and they basically just fired the Baath army. It's not going to be this. It's not going to be the same thing. It's not going to be the same thing. These guys aren't going to like form up a big resistance. First of all, because the Sunni, they can call them HTS, but it's basically ISIS, Al Qaeda, Al Nusra. These are head choppers. Okay, they're straight up head choppers. So when they say to women, "You better put a veil on," Christian, Alawite, we don't care. You better put a veil on. You better put a veil on, okay? Because if you don't want to just stay locked in your house with no food and water, if you want to actually go out shopping or move, from town to town, we're going to set up checkpoints and we're going to yank you out of your car. And when we check your ID and it says you were in the Syrian army, head chopped off, right? Or you don't have a beard. This is an important part of this culture is the beard is like how I'm a true Muslim. I got this giant beard, shaved my mustache. Maybe my mustache grew out because I've been in combat for 2 or 3 weeks, but I got this giant beard and not much mustache. That means I'm a true follower of the prophet. The soldiers, and you see this in Morocco and lots of other places, the soldiers are clean shaved. And this is a way that they can separate, when the Assad regime or the king of Morocco is in charge, the soldiers are identifiable by their clean shaved. Definitely not he's definitely not a jihadist. If he was a jihadist, he'd have a giant beard, right? So when you see people right now in Syria and they only got like a 1 week beard, they're going to be checking your ID. Oh, were you a Syrian soldier? Head chop. Or temporarily in this or that province, they might say, oh, you can go home. We got your name here. You can go home. Next month, we may be coming around to pick you up and chop your head off, right? But this is what's going on right now in Syria. So it's not a situation where factions are going to say, well, I don't want a pipeline, so I'm going to drive 100 miles and form a new militia to take her. No, the people that own the property right now are in control of it. As long as the new Sunni masters say, yeah, we think you're abiding by what we're doing, you're now, remember, Syria was 70% Sunni Muslim all along, and it was dominated by, a faction of Alawites and Christians and secular Sunnis for the last half century, for a century, since the French. And this is a typical pattern that you see in colonial empires. They put a minority in charge so that they don't have to go out into the bazaars and, at the street level collecting taxes or enforcing laws. You get a minority, you put them in charge, let them do the dirty work. When the colonial powers leave, now Assad is out. It's sort of analogous to a colonial power leaving, because the Russian support of Assad is gone. Assad himself is gone. Now, all of a sudden, the Alawites and Christians, just like Rwanda, it's payback time. In Rwanda, it was you Tutsis aren't in charge anymore, and now it's payback time. Well, in Syria, the leader, Jelani, can say, we're moderate, we're not doing that. But down at the neighborhood level, there's people with huge grudges that are saying it's payback time. And you Christian whores better put the hijab on or else. and no more selling alcohol, right? I mean, no more of that. So no matter what Jelani says from Damascus, people that are strict Sunni Muslims are going to be enacting their rule, and we could see Syria turn into something like Libya, just a wild free for all, or we could see it turn into something like ISIS, or we could see it turn into something like a Sunni version of Iran after 1979, where the Sunnis do maintain complete control, or it could be balkanized. The real politic might be that west of the coastal mountain range, the Russians will allow the bases for the Russians west of the coastal mountain range, and that's where the Alawites and Christians are going to start percolating as much as they can. So we really don't know. We're in very early innings in Syria, but Syria is just part of this ongoing global phenomenon we're watching. It's just like it's like a lab experiment, like Ireland. You can look at Syria and look for trends. You can look for examples, and you can say, all right, what can we take from Syria that might be applicable elsewhere? Like what I wrote about that motorbike warfare is like, putting 20 motorbikes into a container, 10 containers, 200 motorbikes, that could go anywhere. Those could be dropped anywhere that you have 100 people to ride around with guns.
And in Ireland, just stealing the buses.
Just hijack buses. Machetes.
Ireland's going to be easy. If they go hog wild in Ireland, which I think they will at some point, it'll be quite easy, actually. I think, in my opinion. I could be wrong, obviously.
Well, and what we're seeing in a lot of cases, it seems to me, something that came out of the scamdemic, the plandemic, the British Army, and Mike Benz, who's on Twitter as Mike Benz Cyber, he's been doing a lot of work in this area in terms of not only censorship but social manipulation. The British Army turned its PSYOPs units into what they called nudge units. Nudge. We're just going to study the population like they're sheep in a corral, and what will happen if we put this sound on? Will they go right or will they go left? What will happen if we do this to their food, the temperature, right? Make wolf sounds over here. They did this to their own people in the UK, the nudge units. They took their army psychological operations units and they applied them to their own British people, censoring anybody that's saying, hey, this jab might be not a safe thing. Censor them and amplify the message that it's safe. And not only that, like propagandize, oh, look, all the nurses and doctors are dancing the vaccine dance, right? This kind of PSYOP is becoming extremely scientific. Going back to rape of the mind, that was in the early stages of understanding this. It's a well explored science now, how to nudge people in the behavior that you want.
And you need those intoxicants. That's the grease of psychological warfare. The grease is intoxicants, and it has been.
If half the people are stoned all the time,
people have not stoned, drunk. It doesn't matter. This has been known. These old books that I read. It's in so many books, man. It's 1648, dude. This book was published 1923 or 28, but it's from a 1648 book, and they're talking about doing it right here. I mean, here you can look it up. Look it up in this book right here. Thomas Gage, right? Can you see it? You can see it.
Yeah, but
you can look it up in this book and see what they're talking about. The Spanish getting the Indians drunk and basically just robbing them blind.
What's the name? Say the title again, Michael, because people are always asking me. They're like, I got to have a book list of all the mentions on here.
You won't find that book.
It's called It's Thomas Gage, Gage, Golf Alpha, Golf Echo, Thomas Gage, the English American, a new survey of the West Indies, 1648. I'll show it to you again so you can screenshot it. I'll hold it up for 10 seconds. Screenshot it.
Back it a little bit.
Got it? You can go in here and read about it. So on page 241 is where it starts. about, getting the Indians drunk and how they have a problem with alcohol. I see that all over the world. I see it with my own eyes, and I read it in these old books all the time. It's
This
the
was
same
probably
story over and over and over.
this was probably an old story with the Babylonians and the Assyrians and the Scythians.
Yep. Just get them drunk, beat them. It's not, I found something from Marco Polo a few weeks ago, and somebody mentioned it on one of my comments on Twitter or X. And then I happened to have the book, Marco Polo's, Journeys Across Asia. And it's talking about, oh, check out, you'll love this brainwashing. It's pretty epic. So he takes these young boys about 12, he gets them high, not Marco Polo, he's telling the story about somebody else. He gets them high. And so on the opium, however you get high on opium, I don't know. But so they fall asleep for like 3 days. When the boys wake up, they're in this very nice garden.
Oh, sure.
They've been told about this before.
Yeah, that's the hashish assassin.
That's right, exactly. And so then they wake up and they're in this beautiful garden with beautiful girls with great food and wine, and they're like, I'm in Eden, I'm in the heaven, right? And paradise. And then, then basically the cult leader is like, oh, go, you have to do this assassination, and you come back and you can get to heaven.
This forever. You'll get this forever. This is heaven.
Yeah.
You got a taste of heaven. You just have to
epic.
You have to ninja your way in and stab some enemy of mine. But don't worry, because when his bodyguards kill you, this is what you get.
Speaking of 12-year-old boys, let me say something real quick. I was going to get a haircut a few hours ago, right? And because I didn't want to look like Matt. And so I went in and I went into this barbershop. And yet they have to open the door because they keep the doors shut around here because people come in and, there is a bad economy. But anyway, I go in and there's a kid, probably 12, running the barbershop, and his brother, maybe 14. It looked like the 12-year-old was in charge. They literally look, I think he really was about 12. And the other one was probably about 14. There was no adults in there. There were people getting their hair cut, and they were just laughing. And I was like, did they is their father not here, and they just opened the barbershop and are making some money, And I was going to get my hair cut, but they didn't know how to work the card machine, and I don't have any cash. That's why I don't have a haircut. But I mean, it was just funny. I'm going into, a barbershop down the road. It's like a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old running the thing, and they don't know how to run the card machine, so I don't have a haircut. So can't make up this stuff.
I want to ask you guys, what do you think is going to happen in Lebanon now?
I think it'll be better. I think it may be better for, Lebanon's. I was there in 1982 during the Reagan era, 82, 83.
Were you there at that bombing, or?
I was there when the embassy was bombed in the spring, not when the Marines were bombed in October. Mm. The embassy on the Corniche on the seafront was bombed in the spring, but the Shia are not the majority in Lebanon. They're like 30%. So this is like the flip side of Syria. So the Shia are not the majority in Syria either, but they had so much power because the Russians were backing Assad and the Alawites and the Shia and the Christians and the non-secular Sunnis. So that allowed free transit by vehicles and by air corridor from Iran to Lebanon. That's how Hezbollah grew to be such a strong armed force, because they had a direct pipeline, so to speak, to Iran, which is like 95% Shia. So the Shia minority in Lebanon became the power because they were so well armed and they were willing to kill people. They would just assassinate, blow people up, So the majority weren't just one majority. The majority in Lebanon were divided between Christians, Alawites, Druze, Sunnis, non-religious Sunnis, whereas the Shia minority in Lebanon was like one fist, and that fist was very well armed from Iran. That Shia Crescent pipeline from Iran is now completely cut forever, or for the next decade at least. So the Hezbollah is going to wither on the vine because they're getting no more arms. They had that decapitation with the pagers. They fought the Israelis. a lot of their fortifications and so forth were destroyed in the last 2 months, and now they're going to have to reckon with the anger of the Christians, Sunnis, non-secular, non-religious Muslims, the Alawites, the Druze, that are tired of being under the thumb of Hezbollah for the last 30 years. So it's kind of like a mirror image of what's going on in Syria. Now it's going to be payback time against the Shia in Lebanon. I don't mean that they're going to be like dragging Shia out and shooting them. I just mean they're not going to be the dominant political force, even though they're only like, less than a third of the population. That third of the population has ruled Lebanon for the last 30, 40, 50 years because of their strong connection to Iran, which was enabled by the Assad regime. It's also crazy to understand the Middle East. It's like trying to pull a whole basket full of cobras and rattlesnakes, and mambas, and explain to everybody that the mambas are only allied with the rattlesnakes since the cobras bit a mamba last month. That's the Middle East. And I get it when people say, Matt, I don't give a damn what happens in Syria or Lebanon or Iran. I'm an American. I'm just looking at it. What lessons can you learn? Like a cargo container can hold 20 motorbikes. You see these street takeovers in America where 100, urban kids are zooming around on ATVs and motorbikes pulling wheelies.
Skateboards. Matthew, I've seen
but just defying the police. The police say clear it, and they're like, screw you, make us. So they have already got the skills.
I want to let me state this clearly. This is important. I've seen them in Washington and in Portland and other places. You'll have like 20 or 30 guys suddenly come in on skateboards really fast. I mean, from it, not from 8 miles away, of course, but from, let's say, 5 blocks away. Before you know it, really quickly, you don't hear them until they're right there. I've had it happen right by me. Antifa's just coming in, they assemble somewhere, and then boom, really quick.
Yeah, and the wheels on a skateboard are very hard plastic. It's like what they call trucks, right? They're like roller skate things on the front and back. And they learned that they can use that to break windshields. So you're carrying an innocent thing, a skateboard, right? But it can break a window. Those 2 hard wheels will absolutely smash a window.
And 20 or 30 guys are in there like that. You don't hear them until they're just right on you.
And then they can disperse just as fast.
Yep.
And that's the essence. And that's the essence of this motorbike warfare I'm talking about, because you can put 100 guys with. Yeah, you can focus 100 guys with AK-47s, 50 caliber, 12.7 millimeter machine guns, anti-tank rockets. They can attack a target like a police station or a military outpost, and before the defenders can react, call up to headquarters. Where's artillery? Where's our close air support? They're already gone. They've done their attack and they've dispersed. Now they're out over 100 acres of desert. What do you hit?
But that's what. Oh, sorry, Matt.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's why I wonder. Going with Syria, will these factions of people do this guerrilla style tactic against the Israelis, or to repel them? Because Israel moving in, they're not going to leave now.
Not the Israelis, not the Turks, the Americans, because the Israelis, number one, are just going to, with sheer firepower, build fences and fortifications. In the north, the Turks, and in the east, the Americans, they rule with what's called the suitcase handshake. I think we just saw from Damascus, like something we saw at the fall of like Kandahar, a compound where Taliban, after we fled, went into a compound. In the quad of the compound were like just weapons everywhere. They went into a long room in this compound, and it was like table after table just stacked with $100 bills in like the bank, like just stacks, like millions and millions of dollars, like 100 feet of tables stacked with $100 bills. That's how you control these countries, because every week you're going out, as a CIA officer, you're going out and you're making the suitcase handshake. It's like, as long as every week I get my $20,000, I'm on your team. And in the east of of Iraq, that's how it works. Plomo o plata, right? Lead or silver. If you're on my team, every week you get a suitcase full of $100 bills or 100 euro notes. And if you're not on my team, you're going to get cluster bombs. So take your pick. It's like the cartels in Mexico, but it's Syria.
Will the IDF move into southern Lebanon then and occupy that?
I doubt it. It's a good question, because the Litani River, that little point that goes up, that's the Golan Heights. If you go west from there, there's the Litani River, and they've always tried to get to that. In the 80s, they held that for some period of time, but there's so much guerrilla warfare, and it was just so costly to hold it. But the bigger picture is that right now, Hezbollah is cut off from any resupply. No more rockets, no more guns, no more suitcases full of millions of dollars. I mean, they'll still get paid, but it won't be as
those
easy.
dollars, man. Cicero said what in Rome a long time ago, the sinews of war are infinite money, or something like that. Cicero, the sinews of war are infinite money, right?
Right.
It's just, we can just print it. And it's a tax on Americans. It's fiat money, so it causes our inflation to go up, but it happens slowly, and you don't see it directly happening. So, creature from Jekyll Island stuff.
Yeah, and some of it is going right to Wall Street, to the Goldman Sachs hedge fund managers, et cetera. They're like the first takers they're the first recipients of this fiat money.
And the first recipients are the ones who really make the money.
Right, because that's before the inflation bites the rest of the population.
Right.
They're spending those millions of dollars at today's prices. By the time it percolates down and inflation bites, it's all worth less. But the people that are the direct recipients of the printed thin air ghost fiat money are the biggest winners. But that also goes to, around the world, where American airplanes land with pallets full of cash. And the pallets full of cash go into some CIA vault in an embassy. And every week there's a suitcase handshake to, dozens of chieftains that, as long as you are on our side, defend our pipeline, keep those oil wells pumping, right?
I've seen so many of those handshakes. I've been physically present when they happen. I mean, it's just like, people might think that this is uncommon. This is like going to get milk
every day.
This is like completely normal.
And when you say, wait a minute, ISIS was defeated like years ago. Trump told the military, let's get out of Syria.
Yeah.
And the military basically said, no, we're not. I mean, literally, that's what happened. The military said, no, we're not, because those suitcase handshakes aren't just going to tribal chieftains in Kurdistan and eastern Syria. Those suitcase handshakes are going to generals here in America. They pop up on Fox News. These generals, these contributor generals on Fox, they got the suitcase handshake. Their suitcase handshake is, as long as you go on Fox, we're going to pay you $300,000 a year just to be in the bullpen. And when we call you to give an opinion on what we should do in this or that country, should we bomb Iran or should we, support Israel? It's like, you want to be a contributor? That's $300,000 a year. And we'll throw in, you can be on the board of Raytheon, and there's $2 million a year.
How much do you think they would pay biggest people in the world to smoke dope in front of millions of young people?
I think Rogan did it as just a useful idiot.
That he's just the complete, utter moron.
At that point, I would love to see some repentance, him and Elon too. I would love to see some people say, I made a mistake. Repentance is great. I made a mistake.
They would have huge credit if they did that. If they said, I made a mistake, it's a huge error. And then the next thing you know, their support would grow.
That's right. But human ego and rationalization, all these factors are so huge. But when I see the Fox News generals on TV, and they're saying, now's the chance, we got to carpet bomb Iran. Now that we've beat them in Syria, right? We've got to send missiles further into Russia, and we got to start bombing those targets in Iran. These guys are just as paid off as the Bedouin Kurds in eastern Syria that are paid to pump the oil to Turkey. they're just as paid off. Instead of a suitcase full of $100 bills, it's a sinecure contract with Fox, 300 grand a year to once or twice a week. Come on, they go to your house. It's the
sinews of war.
But they'll come to your house. They'll put a Google wire into your house with like super high speed network level connectivity. They'll build a green screen in your house so that when we call you, you'll come on and you'll be like our little organ grinder monkey. And that's just as plomo o plata as the guy in Eastern Syria. And I'm talking about all these paid generals and former intel, former intel officers. They're just paid whores.
Yeah. Bottom line.
I have more respect for the guy in Eastern Syria. The chieftain, the Bedouin.
Matt, I don't know if I asked you this yesterday, and Michael, what do you think happens to Iran? Will Israel cross over Lebanon to bomb Iran, or just let them implode from within? If you think they're going to implode from within.
Right now, it's going to be hands off of Iran. Iran is going through its own political struggle, and there is a lot of secular modernizing forces at work in Iran that are tired of supporting Hezbollah and being, having hassles flying to Europe and America, that would like Iran to be closer to the West. So it's not just cut and dried like, oh, Iran, that's like Ayatollahs and radicals, and they're all just hating the West. So there's an internal struggle going on in Iran right now. And Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, this month, this rest of this year into next year, they're all in a huge state of flux. So nobody's going to be bombing Iran right now because Iran is reeling after what's happened. Syria is reeling. Well, IDF bombed the shit out of Syria, but hitting military targets, arms depots, airports full of helicopters and planes that may or may not have been ever flight worthy. These boats that they sank in Latakia probably hadn't been out away from the pier in years, right? I don't think they had missiles in those launchers, but they're sunk now. But Israel's not going to touch Iran.
What about Saudi?
And I think that and we're also in a period of like super diplomacy, where in all of this flux state, the diplomats are all feeling each other out. Like, look, we're coming to a new era. What should we do? How should we live? So this is the last time Israel's going to be trying to strike Iran. Now, Syria, yes, because Syria's got no government, no defense, no way to react. And Lebanon is in another state of flux where Hezbollah is going to be weaker and no resupply.
Do they surrender, Matt? Will Hezbollah surrender, or will they fight?
No, they'll never surrender. These are devout Shia Muslims. They'll never surrender. But they just aren't going to be getting more weapons, and they aren't going to be getting paid. And that power balance will tip towards, remember, the majority in Lebanon is not like, it's not like 30% Shia, which is Hezbollah, and 60% Sunni, which hates Hezbollah. The 60% in Lebanon is Christians, Druze, Sunnis, secular people that don't give a damn about religion. That's not like a fist. Like Hezbollah, the Shia Hezbollah could be a fist in Lebanon. But now the fist is going to atrophy because it's not getting, resupplied. But that doesn't mean that the 60% suddenly forms a big coalition to beat down Hezbollah. Now the 60% will be competing among everybody more on an equal basis. Between five factions.
Sargis Sangarai would be a good man to talk with. He's a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel intel guy, and he's a Christian from that region. I've been with him in Japan and Thailand, talking with people from Burma and that sort of stuff. But he's a good one to talk with, and I message with him all the time. And again, I've been with him in Japan doing stuff in Thailand and whatnot. But he knows all about the Christian problems there in Syria.
Yeah, and they potentially
he is a Christian from Syria.
Genocided. They could be flat out genocided right now.
Oh, that's what he's worried about. That's where he is.
There's 2,000-year-old churches. There's 2,000-year-old churches that that none of the Muslims, I mean, think about it, over the last 1400 years, none of the Muslims were so radical that they like blew up these churches, right? Now, at different points, when you learn about Islam, it doesn't mean that we're like considering you on an equal basis. But if Muslims are in a majority, particularly Sunni Muslims, and the minorities will accept their subservient status and pay a special tax called jizya tax, and they're going to be basically, we'll tolerate you. And this can work for both sides, but it's in a state of flux. For example, from Turkey to Morocco, you could have, we'll tolerate the Christians and we'll even let them sell alcohol. Like we'll let them.
And they did in Iraq. That's why they love the Christians, because the Christians run the alcohol stores.
And it's like the joke. It's like the American Southern joke. What is it? What does like what do two Baptists say when they meet in a liquor store? I forget. I'm blowing the joke, but it's like they'll never meet in a liquor store. So they're in the liquor store, but they're never going to like, hey, Joe. It's like, so the Muslims that are buying alcohol in Baghdad, they're officially not being good Muslims, but like they're all happy that there's Christians selling it.
They would tell me that all the time. They'd be like, "Oh, we hope the Christians will come back. We can't get any alcohol." They would say it. Right. They'd say that straight up.
The radical Sunnis are not joking around. They're like, "You put on a hijab, or else," and the "or else" is really bad.
That's
and
right.
We're not selling alcohol anymore. Straight up, period. Right? We're gonna, kill you for that. So
yeah.
So right now in Syria, it's a very scary time to be a Christian or an Alawite because your backers are gone. But in Lebanon, it's the flip. In Lebanon, it's the Shia Hezbollah that are now like, oh crap, what's going to happen next? And Israel's, claiming territory, and Turkey's claiming territory, and America's going nowhere. I saw a tweet this morning by somebody that American forces are rolling in from Iraq, reinforcing our forces in eastern Syria.
What about Saudi Arabia, Matt? What happens to Saudi Arabia?
There's this constant tension between like the whole BRICS is not like forming a new currency, but we'll sell oil other than in dollars. Saudi Arabia is probably going to be a little bit stronger right now. Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, especially if they start building this pipeline.
Qatar,
I'm not
too.
saying the pipeline is the be all and end all. It's like Michael's. There's no one ruler in the jungle, right? The jungle's a multiplayer game. For some oligarchs, that pipeline is like their holy grail. Okay, like for the Russians, building Nord Stream to Germany was like a holy grail. There are factions in Britain and elsewhere that pipeline is a holy grail. They see that pipeline and they just see billions of dollars rolling in every month that they control. That doesn't mean that's the top of the whole pyramid in the whole world, but it's a big factor because billions of dollars are going to be spent to make that pipeline a reality. It may not ever be built, right? But right now, Iran is on the back heel. Hezbollah in Lebanon is on the back heel. Christians and Alawites in Syria are just like hoping that they don't get their head chopped off. Syria in a month, Syria could be in a total like 10-way civil war. But I think that the Turks are going to keep a border strip. America's going to keep the East. It'll be interesting when Trump has not been taking the daily briefings because in 2016, before you're inaugurated, you can get these intelligence briefings. And what they did to him in 2016 was they'd give him the briefing, then they'd leak to the Washington Post, oh, Trump just told Putin what we told him, which was bullshit, right? They were backstabbing Trump by like, we'll give you the briefing, then we'll claim that you leaked it, right? So Trump is like, I don't want the briefing, you MFers, because you're backstabbing liars that'll like when he called the president of Mexico and like the next day, it's like an audio of it's out in the world, right? That was like the intel community trying to preemptively backstab Trump. So he's not getting these daily briefings. So when he comes into office after January 20th, he's probably going to be told by all these generals, oh, the Syrian situation is great. We still have the eastern quarter or third of Syria. We're going to lay this pipeline across. It's going to go to Europe. It's going to make everybody happy. So we just got to keep the status quo. Meanwhile, who knows? The Russians may still have their bases on the Mediterranean. There's all this horse trading going on right now. We're in a total state of flux right now.
Do you think
in that region?
One of the things shifting over to Russia, with Paul Craig Roberts was saying earlier that Putin's back eventually will be against the wall. Do you see that with the Ukraine?
No. They're going to go to the Dnieper River. The only question is, will they cross the Dnieper River to take Odessa? And they don't. And I don't think that they want Kiev. I think that they're going to carve a big circle around Kiev. Above Kiev is the Chernobyl nuclear plant and all that. Who wants that? So the Dnieper, like all rivers, it gets narrower and more convoluted the further inland it goes. So I think that they're going to push to the Dnieper River because a bank of a big river is very defensible. It's an obvious geographical dividing line. But as you go north, they're not going to take Kiev, but they probably will want to take Odessa because Odessa is identified very strongly by the Russians as Russian. It was founded by Catherine the Great before America was a country, right? They did this thing in the Maidan coup where they burned those, they burned the Russians in the trade union building, like they set it on fire with people burning to death up in the upper floors. So that was like almost like at a 9/11 level in Russian media. In the Russian psyche, what they did to those people in Odessa is like, oh yeah, we're going to let Saudi Arabia take over Manhattan so they can build a mosque on 9/11. That would be like, no, can't do that. So Odessa is like a strong psychological sticking point for the Russians. So the final line is probably going to be, the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, not Kiev. So Kiev can be part of a rump landlocked Ukraine, and the negotiating point will be: do you want us to continue and take Odessa, or do you want to have a seaport? If you Ukraine want to have a seaport, not be a landlocked shithole rump nation, if you want a seaport, you're going to have to absolutely give us everything east of the Dnieper, not counting Kiev. That's how I see it. But I mean, that'll all come out next year. That's my opinion,
Is it crazy where we're at here as we're approaching the end of 24? What are you guys' thoughts on just evaluating the year, expectations wise? Did it meet it, exceed it in terms of the craziness?
We haven't gone nuclear kinetic. That's good. People are still getting fed, going to the supermarket.
They're definitely getting fed here in Argentina, man. This place isn't short of food.
Right.
They need a better economy, though. Actually, all of South America, this whole place should be as rich as Europe. It's not the resources.
Yeah,
Mike, go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think Uruguay and Argentina are terrific. I think that New Zealand looks great, except New Zealand is like low-hanging fruit that China's just going to grab like an apple off a tree anytime.
Yeah, New Zealand. Not only that, but New Zealand has proven internally they're just look. I mean, they're woke. They woke
like Ireland. They got rid of they had like 10 F-16s. They got rid of them because they cost too much. They're like a dodo bird saying, our last 2 flight feathers, pull them out. They're just a hassle. We don't need to fly anymore. China's going to take New Zealand whenever they want.
What about Europe staying intact still? I mean, it hasn't completely fallen apart.
Forget it. Europe's the Middle East for white people. I spent more than 6 years all over Europe. Ich spreche Deutsch eigentlich, yeah. And I lived in Poland for 2 years, Germany for 4 years. It's just the Middle East for white people.
That's I gotta put that in my Yanisms with Jurassic Trailer Park.
Oh yeah, that's Afghanistan. I mean, at one point I was in Afghanistan. I'm like, this is like Jurassic Park and like a trailer park. You know, I'm from Florida. I know about trailer parks. I'm like, this is it. This is Jurassic Trailer Park. Pashtuns versus Baluch versus Tajiks versus Hazars. You know what I mean? There comes the Uzbeks on the horses. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm one of the Irish diaspora. Okay. So we know people in Ireland that are like right on the knife edge, like, should I stay or should I go? Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I'm part of the Irish diaspora from the potato famine. You know,
yeah.
two young brothers got off the ship, you know, without a penny. And so I can't say, you Irish, you better fight and don't leave or else you're cowards. It's like, well, I mean, I'm an Irish in America. There's Irish in Australia. Hell, there's Irish in Argentina. There's like Calle
Oh, a
Bernardo
lot here.
O'Higgins.
A lot here, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like Avenida Bernardo O'Higgins. That doesn't sound very Spanish.
I read 3 books on the Irish famine and then went over to Ireland, went to the famine museum and all that stuff. They got a little ship out front where they went over to America on these sorts of ships. You know, the Irish famine actually was
coffin
part of a
ships.
genocide. What's that?
Sure, the coffin ships.
That's right, coffin ships. There was one doctor that started to realize that you needed to wash your clothes and hang them out in the sun because the lice, right, causes
Typhus.
epidemic typhus, right?
Yep.
And there's 3 different major types of typhus. One is murine typhus, you know, from fleas, and another is called scrub typhus from chiggers, right? And then there's epidemic typhus from lice. That's where the game cooties comes from. In
Yep.
English, cooties means lice. So when we're taught to, oh, he's got cooties or she's got cooties, it's actually teaching children to stay away from people with lice.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting just in terms of economics, because like this in this book, which is my new book, which is 10 years after a complete collapse, when there's no banks, no financial system, dollars are just like a souvenir. How do you restart things? There's forms of currency that are going to be available.
It ain't going to be
silver.
Bitcoin, brother.
Silver will, silver will still be silver, right? But
Right.
trade barter is initial, right? I have a bunch of ammunition, you have bags of rice. We're going to make a trade if we don't shoot each other first.
Right.
But another form of currency is labor, human labor, and going all the way back to the Babylonians, when one side won a war, there was a decision: what do we do with the captives? We can just kill them, right? They're at our mercy. We can put them to the sword right here today, or we can put chains on them and have them work in fields. What's more moral, kill you or make you work for me? That's the genesis of slavery. So in this book, with 10 years after a total financial collapse, one of the forms of currency that's going to be around is I can work, right? I can pull weeds and
That's a currency right now. I mean, that's what we're working, right? We work.
When there's no diesel fuel to run a tractor, when there's no pesticides, no seeds, the only way if you don't have something to trade, like a bag full of silver or some barter goods, your physical labor is going to be worth something to somebody, at least enough to feed you. And that's the genesis of slavery, indentured servitude, all of these forms of labor. And that's, you can see that either in the African slave trade, where the slaves were sold when they got to America. So if you brought slaves to Jamaica or to Brazil, and they look like Auschwitz, like they're ready to die, or you're not going to be paid much for them. You had an incentive to have the healthiest, strongest slaves when you got to America. And they say history is written by the victors. A lot of what we see in history books and take as like commonly accepted, like the pictures, the ink drawings of slaves like sardines in a ship, only for a very brief period when the British were doing the anti-slave trade blockade of West Africa, the slaves would be held like that only during that period until they were past the coast and past the risk of being captured by a British ship. After that, slaves were brought up in, percentages of them were brought up on deck because you didn't want an unhealthy, dying slave. What could you sell that for? You want a strong, healthy slave to sell for the maximum. As opposed to the Irish coffin ships, the Irish that got on the coffin ships paid up front. So they took ships that should have been sunk, that were semi-derelicts. People would fix up a semi-derelict ship just enough to maybe make one more crossing the Atlantic. The profit is made right in Cork, Ireland. When they get on the ship, they're giving you their silver coins. So the profit is right there. If the ship sinks halfway across the Atlantic, who cares? If they're all sick of typhus and half of them have died before they get to Boston or New York, who cares? So talking about the typhus, it just reminded me of that. There's all kind of incentives, and we're going to, as we go into new eras, people are going to have to rethink, like, what does money mean? Money is a digital thing. It's like Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the same as money. Yeah, what happens when the internet goes down? Well, then I'll have dollar bills. Okay, that'll work for a while. Eventually it can be back to, I can work on a field, with a hoe in my hand. And that's the only reason anybody will feed me. Otherwise, I'll starve. I mean, you've studied these famines. It's not something that's rare in history.
No, they're extremely common. They've only been less common in our lifetimes, but they're clearly coming. The conditions are being set for them. Nord Stream was one of those, and Groningen gas field in Netherlands, and so many others.
Which is the fertilizer basis.
Yeah, right.
The gas is fertilizer.
Right, from the Haber-Bosch process, right? Taking the hydrogen from the natural gas and combining it with nitrogen to make ammonia, and ammonium-based nitrogenous fertilizers, right? So the bottom line is here, actually, that's one of the reasons that Argentina is so attractive. It's got a pork chop around its neck because they got a tremendous amount of energy here. It's energy independent, and it's got a lot of incredibly good farmland. So this is a place where they can, for instance, grow
and not high population density and not super.
No, and the beef is really cheap. So if you like beef, this is it. But we just bought some, and also, even during previous wars and famines, this has been a big export country, right? If there's big famines around the world, which I think will come, countries like this stand to make absolute fortunes just for exporting food, right?
Or at least to survive. If there's a period where shipping breaks down completely, there could be a decade where there's like no ships going, where there's no big ships crossing oceans.
Yeah, in which case you're just going to need to chill out here and get your Spanish learning on, or whatever language
as compared to, say, Japan.
Yeah. Oh, Japan would go into tremendous famine. Japan has been in so many famines. Misako found mention of about 500 famines in the last 1,500 years. They've had so many famines, big and small. We traveled around Japan studying up on famines. Actually, we went to areas where they had famines. If you go to there's this Japanese statue where the boy is walking, reading a book carrying sticks on his back. Every Japanese watching this knows what I'm talking about. That's Kenjiro. Kenjiro is a statue in every Japanese school. Kenjiro, he's reading a book, walking, but he was an autodidact who actually predicted a famine when he was younger, and persuaded everybody to start growing millet instead of rice and these sorts of things. And nobody died in his area, in his prefecture, although tons of other people died. But his name was Kenjiro, and every Japanese watching this knows who he is. And he used to be my screensaver on my phone, actually, but now I've got a map of Nord Stream.
Well, when people look at global maps, not just geographical, but like energy flows, oil, natural gas, and you see these wide and narrow vector lines between all the countries, and people study that, and they look at things like, where are the nuclear reactors, or which country has a really important thing to look at is is, are you a net food exporter or importer?
Yeah.
And even if you're a net exporter, if you're importing the fertilizer, you have to deduct
Like
that
Ireland.
because right.
Ireland, I was there in Ireland talking with Mary Lou McDonald, the leader of Sinn Féin, and she's like, don't you know we export enough food? And I'm like, yeah, but you import your inputs, your fertilizer, these energy, all these other things that you need to create that food.
And the same thing with Thailand and rice. The same in Thailand with rice.
That's right. I went over there and briefed the ex-prime minister friend of mine. I said, you only create 8% of your nitrogenous fertilizers. You import 92% of your nitrogenous fertilizers for Thailand, and rice is a vacuum for nitrogen. If you don't have that, or if it's too expensive for the farmers to buy, and their exports have decreased. I mean, but the bottom line is they're still getting fertilizers. But if you see something like the Straits of Malacca get cut, if you see that sort of thing actually happen, Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Malacca, the Bosphorus, all these different places, which could easily be done. You're a naval man. You know how this is trivially easy. You would see, and as a very strong rule of thumb, if you live on an island, you're probably lined up for a famine, as a very strong rule of thumb. Whatever island that is, whether it be Honshu or whatever, Jeju Island off of Korea, chances are you don't produce enough food. Cayman, yep, you're rich, but if you don't grow much food on Cayman Island, it might be a huge banking island, and it's very rich, but they don't make much food. Somehow it's got to get there, right? Almost every island you look at has a lot more people on it than it would have 100 years ago, but they don't produce enough food there.
Yeah, something I found out when I was writing my second to last book, Red Cliffs of Zerhoun. Morocco, in many ways, is similar to California, where in Morocco, most of the population's in the north, and in California, most of it's in the
they were using gold in that book too. I remember, right?
But they have a coastal mountain range like California with a central valley, and Morocco can feed itself, pure. They also are a huge exporter of phosphates. They're one of the top 3 in the world. Right. They have these gigantic things that look like a ski lift, but they're like truck-sized ski lift cars, in a continuous conveyor going, miles into the desert, out to these giant man-made ports, loading phosphates onto Chinese ships. Like you can see them from outer space, these man-made ports. So Morocco's got the fertilizer. It's got the biggest sardine fisheries in the world. You just go out offshore, there's protein. They found gas and oil between the Canaries, which are Spanish, and Morocco, which they'll share and build have their own source of petroleum energy. So you want to be in a place. Here I am in Florida, right? I'm like 50 miles.
Actually, Morocco, Florida's a huge danger zone now, and Florida. By the way, Florida is one of the biggest Polk County, Florida is one of the biggest phosphate producers in the world. So it's Florida, Morocco, actually Iraq, believe it or not, China, Russia. But Florida, Polk County, Florida is one of the biggest in the world.
But I'm in a horrible spot.
If for some reason, all of the international shipping shut down for a period during an economic crisis or a war, islands, like you said, whether it's a small Caribbean island or Japan, are going to face famine very rapidly.
Really quickly.
All of our the 8 billion people or so that live on this planet only live because of the leverage of the green revolution, which they, not like green like Al Gore, but the green revolution of fertilizer and pesticides and seed technology. We feed multiples of people that we could have fed a century ago. But if you take these technological props out from under, like ships just loading fertilizer, from country to country everywhere. If that stops, agricultural production drops by more than half immediately, and countries like Egypt and Pakistan immediately go into mass starvation.
You could just think about 10 or 15 ships, just say 10 or 15 for argument's sake. I see your analysis all the time, Matthew. You'll get this. Sink a couple in the Strait of Malacca, sink a couple in the Strait of Hormuz, a couple in the Bosphorus area, down by Panama Canal, Suez, of course. That's it, man. You're gonna cut down so much global traffic instantly because people are gonna be afraid to sail through. They're not gonna be able to get insurance.
Right, and the insurance is key because these contracts are only going to happen during these times of economics, global stability, Pax Americana. That's really a bubble. You can be floating in a bubble for years and think that the bubble is permanent, but it's not. The bubble is like something unique in history. 8 billion people fed by all these technological miracles, all of these ships moving and trucks and trains moving. I always use the example of like a fine Swiss watch. If you hammer a ice pick through the fine Swiss watch and you only stop one cog, right? You only damaged 1% of the watch. The whole watch is dead.
That's right.
So you pull one of these pins out of this economy, whether it's a war or an economic financial disaster, a cyber attack, something like that. And countries that are, ships are pulling into Egypt and Pakistan loaded with grain.
Wait, they
make pasta in Pakistan, but it's not from Pakistani grain.
Yeah, David Tice, he made the film Grid Down, Power Up.
Yes,
right.
With Dennis Quaid.
I was just with him the other day, but he's going to come have dinner with us on Saturday, right? He's down here in Argentina, but he's the one that did the movie with Dennis Quaid about our grid going down in the United States, and
people have no idea.
No, last week he was here. I had the map out on the big table, and we're going through. Here it is, all the things. He's showing me what he's studied on the grid down, and I'm showing him what I've studied, and we're comparing notes. I wish you could be here. You could go to dinner with us on Saturday.
I would. In this book, I used the example of an aquarium a couple times. The fish in the aquarium think they multi-generational tropical fish in an aquarium, right? They think they're living a life. I got parents, I got children. I look at the glass wall. Point. I look at the glass wall and it's a mirror, right? Because it's of the brightness in the room. So I look at the glass wall, I just see more fish on all sides. I can swim up to the surface. I can swim down to the bottom, right? I can see the goldfish over there and I can see these fish over there. I'm living in a real world, but it's not a real world because if somebody pulls the plug, right, the pump stops, the temperature goes wrong, the pH goes out of balance.
I'm going to start using that, Matthew. I'm going to start using that.
The fish are done.
Yeah, that's it. And
every modern city.
And right now,
I'm in the worst place.
For our aquarium that shouldn't be there.
You guys talk about where I'm in the worst place you could be if there's any type of power.
If the grid goes down in Phoenix, you better hope it's December and not July.
Your candles will just be running down the road.
Yeah, July and August in Phoenix is going to be pretty miserable with no electricity.
Yep. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to do it Pashtun style, and that's where umbrellas become survival tools. You need to know how to make your air coolers the way they do it in India and the way I've seen them do it in Afghanistan. You know how to do that? You can take a bunch of those things that roll down the road and scratch you all over the place. The tumbleweeds. Take things like that and make you a lean-to and pour water on it. If you got any water, stay cool.
Water is going to be a problem too. Yeah. A lot of cities are essentially like an artificial environment, like a tropical fish aquarium.
Yep.
And you pull the plug and they're toast. That's why people like Matt Smith moved to Uruguay and Doug Casey moved to Argentina.
Matt, I haven't watched your interview yet. I just watched part of it, and then I had to take off to try to get my hair cut from the 12-year-old. But Matt's pretty squared away. I saw him give a speech, and he's very smart. And we're talking about Matt Smith in Uruguay, and he was giving this speech that I was at, last month. And he's like, he wants to do his operation there so that he doesn't even need any money. He doesn't use money, right?
That's right.
And I think he's already reached that goal, hasn't he?
Sure. And when I don't want to speak out of school here, but I tell people, have you seen that TV show Yellowstone, even at 1 or 2 episodes?
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either.
That's Matt Smith's place in Uruguay.
I'm going to go see him. As soon as we're finished here, we're going to go see him. We're going to take a ferry over.
And he's doing this project with his son, which is so cool because Matt Smith is a college dropout and figured out how to be an entrepreneur without a sheepskin. But his son Max is doing this program called called the preparation, where instead of spending, $100 to $300,000 on a 4-year degree to learn how to be a communist, right?
To learn how to be a debt slave.
A debt slave and a communist, instead spend a fraction of that money taking EMT courses and working as an EMT, taking firefighter courses, working, fighting forest fires, doing things like that, where in each of these little mini semesters, you're working with a new crew of people, learning how to work with people, learning new skills, learning about the world, traveling from state and country, entirely new environments and situations. I think it's brilliant what he's doing with his son, Max.
Very
Really
smart.
brilliant.
Michael, what Matt suggested to Matt Smith for Max yesterday was the soup kitchen, which I was like, wow, go spend time at a soup kitchen.
Well, this big, not necessarily a soup kitchen, but big scale, church kitchen, big restaurant, carnival kitchen, where you're feeding, 50, 100 people every hour. That's like a huge skill to have. How to coordinate that effort.
Who was that? Matt Smith came up with that, or
no? I was suggesting that for his son Max.
That's a good idea.
Get, and I had years ago, I still have it, before the internet, a book called Work Your Way Around the World, and it was like skills that my wife and I, we collected these skills, like we saw them and we like wrote them down. Like we saw people that were a piano man, like you can just walk into a hotel that's got a dead nightclub and say, I can play the piano and your revenue is going to increase because I can just play the piano here. Work your way around the world. Well, short order cook is a good idea, isn't it? Yep. But short order cook is one of those things where if you can sling hash, right, and just work like a Waffle House menu right now today, every restaurant on a daily basis, the manager of the restaurant is panicking because 2 of his chefs didn't show up, because they're worthless scum drunks, right? I mean, they're great cooks, but they just don't show up. If you can show up and say, I can work in this kitchen right now, you can work anywhere in the world. Maybe you're also a lawyer or an architect, but you have that skill too. In a survival situation where all of a sudden, there's we're all refugees and they don't need any lawyers and they don't need any architects. They need somebody that can run a kitchen and feed 100 people an hour. If you can do that, you're golden, right? I mean, it could be a blizzard or a refugee situation where all of a sudden you've got all these people and nobody has figured out how are we going to feed these people. So getting the large scale food operation skill is huge. And I don't care if you're also an accountant, it doesn't matter. There will be no need for an accountant in these situations, a refugee camp. We don't need an accountant. We need somebody that can feed 100 people an hour.
Well, and
knows how to do this.
And you pointed out too, Matt, that you said work with what you got. If you have to feed a large quantity of food, large amount of people, and you have a limited quantity or limited resources, how can you put something together to feed a bigger group?
Right, and you have to, and that's what Max is learning doing all of these jobs. EMT, firefighter, is even if you're the lowest enlisted man in the company or the battalion. You're learning leadership, believe me. You're not just a cog in a machine. The lowest private is watching the captain, how he deals with the sergeant. They're watching how the captain changes when the colonel's around. So just taking part in all of these experiences, even at the bottom of the totem pole, like Max is, you're learning. And every time you go to a new situation, you've absorbed these leadership lessons because you've been paying attention. One of the things that I went for a short time, I was a Navy SEAL after college. And one of the things that always was most astounded me and I always wanted to tell people, and I've been out for so long, it's ancient history, but it's not like, oh, SEALs can do more pull-ups or SEALs can run, further, whatever. It's that the enlisted SEALs were so smart. Not all of them, but I mean, so many, and the same thing in Special Forces and the Green Berets. So many of the enlisted men. Okay, I was on a college track. I went to a Jesuit high school. Everybody in my family went to college. So I was ROTC. I got commissioned. So I became an officer in SEAL team after BUDS. But for every one of me, there was 20 guys just as smart as me, believe me, who came from some other background, no college in their future. They walked into the recruiter's office And now they're an E4 and I'm an O3. But believe me, these guys are just as smart as their officers. And the SEAL team officers had to be on their toes 24/7 because their enlisted men would know if they're making a mistake. And they wouldn't be quiet about it either. So whether you're like in top of an organization or at the bottom of an organization, you get to watch the whole structure and learn from it. And I think that's what Max is doing is way more valuable than going to some like Luigi Mangione going to University of Pennsylvania. What did that do for him?
Exactly. You know how much debt I have? Zero.
Yeah,
I was
me
in
too.
school. I was literally in school. I wanted to go into physics actually. And so I had some mathematics background and, I'm like, if I continue this route, I'll be nothing but in debt. You know what I mean? It's like, and I've got way too much energy to sit around and be a physicist, actually, as much as I love physics and that sort of thing. And I was actually at Michael Jackson's house doing my calculus homework one night. And that was when I did security for him. And I was like, that's it. I'm leaving. I'm going back overseas. I quit school and that was it. And I have zero student loan debt at all.
Do you know what it costs to go to a regular college now? Like where I went to Kent State in Northeast Ohio. Do you know what's
Were they shooting at you?
No, it's way before my time.
Poor Denton, Ohio.
$30,000 a year it costs to go there now. $30,000 a year for an undergrad.
I think the average American, I looked this up a couple months ago. I think the average American that gets a 4-year degree, or is it a master's? I'm not sure. Has like $250,000 in debt. Does that sound accurate?
Well, an undergrad would be over 100,000.
I'm sorry. That was for medical school.
But undergrad, over 100,000 for undergrad. So you get a measly marketing degree like what I have, or just a finance degree, or sociology, psychology. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to pay that back?
This is something that Matt Smith was talking about yesterday. So many countries are going down this same track. I remember reading about this in countries like Cuba 40 years ago. Oh, everybody is an engineer. Everybody is a doctor. And they're like hustling, trying to like be a gypsy cab driver. Right.
A lot. I see a lot of them like that.
They're not, there's no jobs for them. Everybody has a degree and it's like a hyperinflation of academic degrees.
Fiat degrees.
And so what are you going to do? You're all going to do each other's laundry? I'll shine your shoes. You wash my shirt. That you have to be able to add value, and just having a degree doesn't do that.
No, it's fair. Just think about this though, from a farmer perspective. If it's accurate, what I looked up, I don't know, a month or two ago, that you get about the average medical doctor when they leave the university, when they get their medical degree, they have about $250,000 in debt. That's perfect for having a debt trap for, okay, you have to sell our drugs. You know what I mean?
Permanent slave.
You're a total slave. Of course, you're going to push the jab. You owe $250,000.
Yeah.
You think you're gonna...
I saw a great cartoon where like the mother is holding the child and the doctor is about to give an injection, and the mother is saying, "Doctor, what's this vaccine for?" And the doctor says, "My Christmas bonus."
Oh yeah,
the vaccines.
I saw you publish that.
The vaccines are literally the money churning of so many physicians. They are directly being paid by pharma to put those needles in arms.
Oh man, Misako Ganaha and I, we went to see some doctors in northern Japan, and they were talking about literally, and they let us film them, how they were getting bonuses for giving more jabs. I mean, literally, they went through the whole schedule and step by step. Yeah.
Yeah. In America, and this was a snapshot during the height of the pandemic, but doctors were put on bonus schedules where, depending on the size of your practice, if you had 10% compliance with vaccines, your bonus schedule was down very low. But as you pushed up higher and higher, your bonus schedule was increasing, logarithmically, so that it was like a total push to get like over 90%, so you can max out your income from pharma. It's
organizational
totally
structure dictates outcome.
And this is where, I hope that RFK Jr. just goes in there like Jesus in a temple, knocking tables over.
Let's see.
They're already saying maybe we don't need red dye number 2.
Michael, that's my reaction, and I get so much hate for that response. Like, I just got a message on Twitter. People just attack me because of my, I guess it's pessimism, but I'm just trying to be objective where
It's
things
not
are at.
pessimism to have been around this world a lot.
Well, I haven't been around the world like you have, but
I'm ready for Jesus to knock the tables over.
But Kennedy,
okay, pull out the whip.
I'm hoping Jesus knocks the tables over.
I just don't see them. If he gets in, I just don't see Big Pharma allowing him just bringing it down. I just don't see it. I hope I'm wrong, but I also didn't think Trump would get elected either. So what do I know?
But all of the Syria and Big Pharma and all these politics we're talking about, it's all against a backdrop of our debt. And when you see the debt curve, like 20th century into when you see it going vertical, all right, and you look at every other historical example where that debt curve is going vertical, there's never like, oh, here's the off ramp where some brilliant politician came in and saved us. Never has ever happened. When that debt curve is going vertical parabola like that, it crashes.
Don't say that to the people at Mar-a-Lago, man. They're partying up, man. It's all over. The boys are back. Everything's good.
They should just call it Rome.
I'm still glad it's drunk Denzel Washington trying to land in a field is better than suicide pilot trying to fly into the side of the French Alps. You got a chance.
I don't
crash
think
landing,
he's trying to land it. I don't think he's trying to land it at all. I just wish, but he's not. And hope is not a plan. I'm just looking at the evidence. The evidence is clearly he's a bad guy.
But I'll tell you what, Uruguay and Argentina look better and better.
Yeah.
Guys,
Doug Casey, Matt Smith, buy a ranch and watch it all happen.
Yeah, but I'm American in my heart. Like deep down, I'm a Florida boy, and that's why
I've got my boat.
Michael, are you coming back to the States anytime soon?
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't know when because I got all kinds of things to do. We got the Darien and some other things.
Yeah.
But the as you know, the Darien Gap is still wide open, and well, let's see what we can do about that. If Trump is very serious, he'll close the Darien Gap, which is easy to do. And again, people are always like, don't you understand? Darien Gap is not in the United States. It's Panama. Yeah, I get it. Totally. In fact, we helped get this president. We helped him build we never talked with him, but we helped the Panamanian president run on the platform of closing the Darien Gap.
He's joking. He's joking about making Canada a state. He's joking about making Canada a state. So I don't think
it's not a coincidence that Masako and I were just up there.
Yeah.
Because I've been saying this for a while. Canada's a dead man walking. Somebody's going to take Canada, just like somebody took Hawaii, right? Somebody was going to take Hawaii, and somebody's going to take Canada. It's either going to be China, India, or somebody. It should be us because Canada is basically the Joe Biden of countries. I love Canadians, but I was just up there again for over a month. We were even Yellowknife, which is in the north. It's 250 miles from the Arctic Circle. It's filled with Africans and Afghans and Pakistanis. We were just up there. I hadn't been to Yellowknife since I was 20 years old. Went back there earlier this year, and now it's filled with people from the Middle East and Africa. And the whole country. You go to Brampton over by Toronto, and it's all Indians. You got the Sikhs and the Hindus fighting each other. We went into the Hindu temple with a giant Hanuman out there, and then we walked down the street about 15 minutes to the giant Sikh temple. And I'm like, keep in mind, I spent a year in India and about a year in Nepal, so I about 19 years in Asia, right? So I'm kind of familiar with the architecture of the fights over here, right? Where I'm in South America now. But when you get Sikhs and Hindus together, Sikhs are going to fight Sikhs like Kurds fight Kurds, right? The Sikhs fight each other, and the Sikhs and the Hindus fight each other. And then they're both going to fight the Chinese, for sure. And there's no questions about it. And then you got all these Ukrainians and Somalis and the whole who's who. The aquarium is filled with fish from many seas, right? It ain't going to work.
Well, one of my other analogies is, if somebody throws a basket full of, 10 different venomous snakes into a kindergarten and the snakes are all biting the children, do you blame the snakes or do you blame the guy that threw the basket in there?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When it comes to
those people that opened the gates of Canada, Europe, America, they need to be punished.
That's why I want to hear Trump talking about who are we going to actually physically go get. And I mean physically go get them. The people that are doing this, right? Not deportation is great. We need to do it. We must do it. But we need to physically, just putting out fires, but without going to the arsonist doesn't do shit. I mean,
Right.
because listen, Trump's only going to be around for 2 or 3 or 4 more years, 4 years maximum, right? His expiration date's gone. We have to take care of the actual source of the problem,
And
which is the people
like
doing it.
Traders like Mayorkas, which to me are at least on the level of Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold's crime after he was a great general in the revolution, and then he was wounded, and he was in like a rehabilitation billet at the fort of West Point before there was an academy. That's on the Hudson River where it makes a bend that means that sailing ships couldn't just cruise right past it. They, depending on the winds and things, they might have to anchor and stop there. So they built a fort there and put a chain across it, like a big winch chain, so that ships couldn't sail past West Point down towards New York City unless the fort, allowed it. They also had cannons there that could cover the river. What Benedict Arnold's crime was, he was communicating with the British about letting the chain down at the same period when we're going to have a fake drill, like, let's practice pointing all of our cannons away from the river in case the British attacked us from the east, right? So let's turn all our cannons around. And that was going to happen so that the British could swoop past and invade America. The head of our Department of Homeland Security is literally a Benedict Arnold. He opened our gates to an invasion. Benedict Arnold got caught before he did it. Mayorkas went from a general of the enemy forces, which is in that group, that division is called HIAS, as opposed to Catholic or Lutheran, charities. But his army was HIAS, and he got transferred to being the head of our army.
Yeah,
and he let our defenses down.
Side.
Yeah, and he let our defenses down so that the invasion could happen. He's a Benedict Arnold in place that actually oversaw the invasion.
He's
People
even
like
worse
him,
because he actually funds it. He actually funds the invasion.
yes,
He actually
right.
not only turns his eyes, he actually put money into.
He's paying for the
building up
buses and the
area.
hotels, the debit cards, everything.
Yep.
He should be on billboards as a Benedict Arnold, worse than Benedict Arnold. So until people like that are really punished, I don't think anything is going to significantly change.
Trump isn't serious unless he's physically going after these people. I mean, really going and getting them, right? I mean, like there's many of these people are foreigners and whatnot in different countries. We can physically stop them. First of all, closing down the United Nations, right? Masako Ganaha walked into the IOM office here in Buenos Aires about a month ago and asked for a job, right? The internet, that's the main engine of the invasion is IOM, and they're
UN.
Yep, of the United Nations, which Benedict Arnold is helping. But the guy was really worried. He said, since Trump has been elected, there's a hiring freeze at the United Nations because we're afraid Trump's going to cut our budget, right? And of course, I'm thinking, I hope they do. But I mean, so we talked to them for 15 or 20 minutes in the IOM office here. But they're invading this country too, right? They're invading this country, Argentina, as well, right? So I mean, what I'm getting to is this isn't just the United States. It's everywhere I go. It's Japan. It's Thailand.
Well, when all the shit hits the fan, and all of these things can lead to a lot of attack vectors can lead to supply chain breakdowns, things like that.
Oh yeah,
bank freezes. ATMs aren't working. Debit cards, EBT cards aren't working. You're going to want to be in a place that can feed itself and has its own water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whether it's in the States or whether it's in Argentina, Morocco, somewhere, you're going to want to be in a place where if no ships came for the next decade, you're not going to starve. And you're not going to have like a immediate tribal warfare, Rwanda genocide.
Right.
Which will happen in a lot of cities.
Oh, for sure.
Because when people are starving, their tribal leaders are going to say, you're starving because the Sikhs took all the food. And the Hindus will be saying you're starving because the Hindus, everybody will be pointing at somebody else. Nobody's going to be saying we have to cooperate. We have to work together. It's going to be dog eat dog in these
Canada's already dead.
multicultural.
They just didn't get the message yet. Same with Netherlands, same with Luxembourg, same with Belgium. France, I don't know. It's going to be a close call, probably dead.
When you
Germany,
pull the food out, when the
yeah.
when the supermarkets aren't being resupplied, or when these people from Ireland to Germany to when
London,
they're told
what
they're
about
going to be
London?
deported,
London?
when they're told when these deportation flights start, they're going to go crazy. They're
Yep.
not just going to line up to get on the airplane back to wherever.
London too.
No way.
London's a disaster, right?
Oh,
London, Stan, Masako and I, we went inside that giant mosque there. And we spent about an hour in there. We went in there with Andy No, actually, of all people. And it's you know, it's a giant mosque. It is truly London, Stan. And they're gone. I mean, the King of England, you know, he's on his throne like he's actually a king. People pretend he's the king. He pretends he's the king. So, you know, it's a big pretend game. It's
yeah.
like
Look up the
thing.
pictures from 35 years ago of him and Klaus Schwab, practically, you know, making out.
Did you see
Yeah,
him? Did you
yeah.
see Floyd Mayweather got chased out of London last night by a group of Muslims? Like ran into his car. He was shopping.
No.
You mean the boxer?
Yeah,
fighter.
Yeah, the fighter. Yeah.
Yeah, London's lost, and the police have obviously flipped sides. And in any country where Muslims, when they get to being and people have written this out as a formula almost. When they get to 5%, it's like, we need you to make some accommodations. When it's 10%, we demand these accommodations. When it's 20%, forget it. You're done, because the 10 or 20% will always form a coalition with the left wing, because that way they can dominate the conservatives forever.
There's actually a name for this. It's like something like population quorum or something like that.
Yeah,
because it's something I've seen around the world.
And once it starts, it's irreversible, because the main demand of that Muslim minority is more population reunification. More so, once that you open that floodgate, it's like the dike being broken, and the flow just increases and increases till you're a Muslim country. Hey, look, I have got to punch out of here.
Matt, even though you're just on here yesterday, Matt, you want to plug where people can find you?
but yeah, I've got all these books I've been holding up that you can find them on Amazon if you want them on Audible or Kindle. But I like the printed books the best. But I have books, so I just flog the books. But I know you were doing this full time now, and you have what are you using, Venmo?
Yeah, Venmo, PayPal. I have a PO box too. Some people don't like to use any of that technology, so I do have a PO box. It's all listed. All the links are listed on every episode I put on, both the video and the audio.
And Michael has like this wealthy uncle that just funds him, so he doesn't need any money.
I wish.
He flies all around the world. He flies all around the world, staying in third world jungle hotels for us, so he can report from the front lines.
Oh, you should see. I spent months down in that 1-star hotel at Tenose and Darien.
At the roadhead, the bus roadhead of the whole thing.
Michael, this is actually an Airbnb here, which is actually quite large, but it's a lot cheaper than a hotel room, believe it or not.
Where can people find you, Michael?
In Argentina.
Come on down.
Soon back in the jungle of Darien Gap.
Is that your next stop, Darien?
I'm not sure yet. I'm working on it right now. We got a few more phone calls to make and that sort of thing, but we'll be taking some more people down there.
You must get some frequent flyer miles somewhere.
Too many, man. I hate to fly anymore. Actually, I don't fly as much as people think. I just go somewhere and stay for a while. This is my 99th country, actually. Been here for about a month and a half, I would say now.
Isn't Chuck Holton's back in Ukraine, right?
Did he go back? I just messaged with him the other day.
I thought I saw him back on X.
Let me see. I sent him a message earlier today. I don't know if he responded. I didn't see anything. I just told my sister and brother I'm going to claim the Bermudas for our family, by the way. Bermuda. We're going to name it the Eastern Islands. I see a message from them. That's why that came to my mind. Because, my uncle was the first one born. You've heard it here first.
Bermuda's nice.
Michael, where can people find you real quick?
I'm on X on everyday Michael_Jan, and I'm on Substack and X.
Yeah, I finally did another Substack today called Motorbike Warfare, and I'm on Twitter as Matt Bracken 48 and Gab too. And I'm on Coffee and a Mic a lot, I've heard.
Coffee and a
Yeah.
Bracken.
Coffee
Every
and a
time I
Bracken.
turn it on, man, I'm like, hey, there's Matthew again. If I want to find you, I just go here first. I haven't heard from Matt in a while, so I'll call
Yeah,
Michael.
since yesterday and the day before yesterday.
Guys, as always, thank you so much. Merry Christmas,
you.
Happy New Year, and Matt, it might not be that long, I'm sure, before you come back on here. So,
You bet.
mic drop.